Oxford, Mississippi, home of Faulkner, fried catfish, and now Bob Dylan. In the spring of 2025, a group of students at Ole Miss stepped into one of the most unlikely classrooms in America to study the poetry, mystery, and mythology of Bob Dylan.
I've always loved Dylan. My grandfather loved him. He had a giant collection. I think it was like all of his music up until probably like 1985, 6. So it's always just been something in my family that's been popular. But I have been getting more into folk music, and so I wanted to know more about him.
When my grandmother passed away, I inherited 2 things from her. I inherited her guitar, and I inherited her records. And I didn't really look at those records until later on, and I still don't play the guitar. When I did, look through them, there's a lot of Dylan in there. There's a lot of Joan Baez, lots of, folk singers. And I thought, when I heard about this class, what better way to kind of get to know her and get insight into her than a class that focuses on the music that she listened to.
I listened to Dylan in college a little bit, just like most people. At one point early in my career was a high school history teacher. And so I would use Dylan songs when I would teach about the civil rights movement or the protest movement, the Vietnam anti-war movement. That probably got me started in thinking about Dylan in an academic way. Then I got kind of down the rabbit hole of, hey, there's way more to this person and to this artist and to their historical and cultural significance than I ever really thought. There were just so many different intersection points between Bob Dylan and the South that I literally just sat upright in bed one night and said, I've got it. We need to do a class called Dylan in the South. I guess what surprised me the most about Dylan's intersection points with Mississippi is how many there are. For somebody that grew up in Minnesota, had no real Southern roots, no real Southern contact until he was already famous. He'd never really been to the South.
The course wasn't just about the songs. It was about where the songs come from, a place that Dylan's traveled through his entire career, even if only metaphorically, the American South.
When we were reading the chapter on Oh Mercy and just the passion that he talked about New Orleans with really surprised me. And when we started listening to Oh Mercy, I was reading Chronicles and I was like, there's all these New Orleans references, and he kind of delayed the fact that he was there in New Orleans recording this album. So I don't know, it just seemed like he was always this wanderer, but that was the one place where he felt a little bit settled and seemed to be in a groove and in this period of realization. So it just seemed like a point of reflection. It was cool to see that.
Dylan has a fascinating voice, not just to listen to his voice in song, but when you read things that he's written, it has a lyrical quality to it. It has some heft and some weight, like a poet to it. And so once I really started digging into Dylan's writings, and then reflecting that into his songwriting, it was endlessly fascinating as a writer for how somebody was able to pull so much imagery and context in such an economy of words. There's this really great definition of the Southern imaginary. The scholar is actually a University of Mississippi scholar that invented the term. The Southern imaginary talks about how the South is not just a real place. It is also a mythological place. It is also a place that lives in the minds of Americans, lives in the minds of people around the world.
I think that in some senses he uses the South to talk about the issues that he wants to talk about, but I also think that he has a real connection to this place.
He's always had this obsession with the South, constantly, throughout his career. And I believe as his career has furthered, he's obsessed himself with it more. And not in the way of like his lyrics or certain songs, but his vibe and his tone and his overall like aura.
From Robert Johnson's Crossroads to Faulkner's mythical Yoknapatawpha County, the South isn't just a place. It's a language Dylan speaks fluently, and sometimes critically.
Oxford Town is a song that Dylan wrote in 1962, shortly after the James Meredith riots at Ole Miss over Meredith enrolling in the university. Only a Pawn in Their Game is specifically about the murder, the assassination of Medgar Evers in Jackson, Mississippi during the summer of 1963. Mississippi is a song that Dylan wrote in the late 90s and was on his 2001 album Love and Theft. And the hook for it is the only one thing I did wrong, stayed in Mississippi just a day too long, which the tune of which also comes from a civil rights anthem and then predates even that. So there's all, I mean, I could point to 100 other direct Southern examples in Dylan's music.
Something about John Wesley Harding feels like the more authentic South. It's folkier, it's a little bit grittier to me. It's based in legends and stories that, you know, I'm from New Orleans. I grew up hearing similar things to that, so that feels very Southern and almost like nostalgic Southern to me.
Dylan borrows heavily from lots of Southern musicians. His earliest influences included Leadbelly, who's from Louisiana, Hank Williams, he listened to on the radio while he's growing up. He cites Hank Williams as one of the seminal influences of him. Hank Williams is from, Montgomery, Alabama. Robert Johnson, Delta blues man. Jimmy Rogers from Meridian, Mississippi. All of those and more. Woody Guthrie is the major influence on Dylan in his career, particularly his early part of his career. And he's from Oklahoma, which, if you consider the SEC to be the South, is part of the South.
He does lift. We use that word lift in class like all the time. A lot of things from the South, specifically blues music, which was founded, by Black performers and Black artists in the South. We've always talked about in class was due credit paid for them. Has he given enough credit to these creators, to the foundation of blues, to the foundation of rock and roll, which he also draws from?
I believe that he's reinventing Southern history in a way. I don't personally think that he's taking from old artists within the South and trying to fully explain the history. I think he's taking bits and pieces and trying to find a way to explain what he wants people to know or understand, or he's trying to express something that he just can't fully get down. And I think a lot of these past Southern musicians or old random poets or Greek poets and philosophers that he's obsessed with, I think sometimes he doesn't even know what he's thinking. Or he doesn't know how to fully voice something or think about something. So I believe he looks through a lot of different resources to get a better understanding of life.
Dylan is very weird. He's not a historian, right? And he's not really an activist. I think the best box to put him in is sort of a poet, an artist. In our society, in all societies, those artists are usually the ones that sort of help us wrestle with the hard questions, our social conscious, how we're evolving as a society. And so I see Dylan's voice as being more in that vein of being somebody that can help shine a light in the same way that a journalist does on the darker parts of our culture, the darker parts of our society, and put those out there for people to kind of wrestle with in a variety of ways.
The Dylan class is about more than Dylan. It's about how we process the world through sound, through stories, through questions that don't have answers.
The thing I'll take from this class, I think, has been the level of enthusiasm and excitement that the students have had, which is very uplifting to me. When you're doing research, you're kind of on an island. And so to have a room full of people that have engaged with this material and have gotten a lot out of it and enjoyed it, and the discussions that we have in class every day with so many different majors, to be able to have, a political science major that can approach this from that lens, or a classics major, or a Southern Studies major, psychology, or general business, entrepreneurship, IMC, journalism, all of those different voices and perspectives in a room has just been a really, really fascinating educational environment.
It's been a really good time getting to know everybody. I have a few new friends like Madeline and BB. I feel like that I'll be able to call and talk about music or Dylan with in the future. I could see myself doing that. So I think that's cool. We just have a lot of majors that are in this class, lots of people from different places, and it's been cool to listen to everybody's perspectives and pick out my favorite Dylan songs.
I joined this class hoping to meet some people who kind of thought like me, and actually all the friends I made in this class hate Dylan. When you do something that you love, you just naturally connect with people, meet people, because they also love that thing or just are interested in that thing, whether that be Bob Dylan, whether that be, journalism, whether that be art, whatever it might be. And I feel like we all got to connect over that in the class. It feels very casual. Something that I'll never forget is kind of Dylan's idea that he's lost his magic. And I think about that listening to, any of his things after the 60s. It kind of breaks my heart to think about, and kind of like what the idea of this magic is. What happens after you've fully reached your potential? What do you do with the rest of your life?